What is going on? It's Alex coming back at you with another video, and today I'm doing a very unique episode, which I am going to be pretty much calling myself out for being wrong about certain players at the start of the year versus where they are now. If you are new, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. I make content not exactly like this because it's the first time I'm doing it, but draft related pretty much every single day, if not every single day. So we're at 13,400 right now. Let's get up to 15K. I mean, it's a dream goal by the end of the year. Not going to happen, but maybe we can get to 14. So let's try to do that. But regardless, these are basically going to be going over the players who I wasn't necessarily super high on and ended up proving me wrong, but also the guys who I was high on and just didn't end up working out. Now, there's so many more players that I could have put on this. I mean, at the end of the day, unless they stayed in the exact spot, they either did better or worse. But these are some guys I wanted to highlight, and I maybe had a reason or two why. So let's get into this, starting out with the guys who went off, the guys who ended up actually performing better than what I expected by a noticeable margin, and I want to explain why. So Abdul Carter's first. So it's not going to be all like this format, but I did want to do it for a particular group of players, especially some of those who are at the top. And Abdul Carter was somebody who had a 30% missed tackle rate at linebacker. He had really good zone coverage ability, has some flashes as an edge rusher and pass rushing, I should say. But I didn't really trust his development. And I didn't think that necessarily he was going to morph into the player that I've fallen in love with as well as everybody else. And I was higher on him than certain other people that even I know. If you hear scratching in the background, it's because of the rabbit that you guys voted on Twitter for me to be able to rescue. So you guys get to deal with the pain. But regardless, Abdul Carter, his progression is just so exponentially faster than anybody probably would have predicted. I mean, like people who actually projected this pulled it straight out of their ass. You don't go from a linebacker to an edge rusher that is legitimately unbelievable in just one offseason. Like that is just unheard of. But Abdul has done it, and he's been consistent, and he's gotten better as a run defender. Maybe not the best guy on planet Earth, but at the same time, he's a former linebacker, not really used to being with the big boys on the offensive line, and he's done so well for where he is at right now. So Abdul Carter's done a fantastic job. Dream fit. That literally, if you go to Vic Fangio, that'd be my dream. I try to keep them relatively realistic, but for Abdul Carter, I mean, who gives a shit? It's kind of there for fun. We know where he's going to be going. But yeah, if I could end up like dropping him on a squad, the Eagles, hands down, I would think he would be such a damn good fit. But don't care too much about the dream fits. I mean, they're there more for fun than anything. But I think the area where I could have I honestly don't really think there's too many learning lessons from Abdul Carter. I honestly think he's the exception, not the rule. If I hear a linebacker transition to edge rusher, I think there's going to be a longer growth curve than Abdul Carter has. So really the thing is you can end up having faith that certain players really can like buck the curve and end up actually being really awesome. So originally I thought he was going to be like a later round 2 guy, and he ended up being he's like now top 10, top 5 pretty much. So super excited for Abdul Carter. The next guy I want to talk about is Cam Skattebo, and I'm not going to go super duper in detail here. And the reason why is because I'm going to be doing my running backs video this week, and we're going to have back-to-back running backs on this. But with Cam Skattebo, like it really was like you see this white guy who's not necessarily the most athletic guy on planet Earth, and he's just breaking a bunch of college tackles. And watching ASU's tape, you look at it and it's like, wow, this guy looks low-key like Marshawn Lynch. That's super fun, but you don't really factor in the legitimacy until you truly sit down and watch every single rep this guy did. And I'm just going to be so honest. He is well worth the top 100 pick. He might be worth a top 64 pick. Like, he is fantastic. You can say, like, I love him with Harbaugh because Harbaugh loves just a hard-running offense. But, I mean, obviously, people love how hard he runs like Isaiah Pacheco, so could have put a Chiefs there. Again, don't take Dream Fit very seriously. It's just they were honestly more for fun. But this dude is just an absolute mauler, like, very similar. I'm not going to spoil it because I wanted to say my comps so badly. I will say it's very adjacent to what I ended up just talking about him looking like. But if you go follow me over on X, you probably have already found out about it. But it's someone who I've actually gotten to see with my own eyes for multiple years. And it just kind of reminded me of their play back in college as well as high school. So Cam Skattebo has done a fantastic job. Like, it just really, you don't take a ASU too seriously. And that's honestly the big learning lesson that, when you do scouting like this, which, I mean, I get paid to yap and I'm a freelancer. I mean, no one gives a shit. But I love football. You guys somehow want to be able to watch my shit. I love you for it. But I mean, it's a learning experience that you guys get to go through with me. And when I try to prioritize guys, like looking at ASU running back isn't really super high on my list. And I was like, you know what? After the performances he's had this year, after him saying he's the best running back in the country, like, let's at least put it to the test. Now, he's not the best, but he kind of is up there. So, again, don't scout the helmet. I ended up doing that, and that's honestly my fault. It wasn't that I scouted the helmet for Cam. It was more so just I ignored it because of the helmet. And so great job for Cam Skattebo for doing a great job. Then we got Omari Hampton. My God. Talk about someone I was wrong about. Like, this past year, in terms of his development, it's been exponential. I think people gave him way too much credit last year for his play, when I honestly thought his vision was complete crap. He used to kind of like stumble into offensive linemen, and it didn't look like it fully clicked. And I think that what really happened this year is, with experience, timing improves, and then also without a heavy passing approach, he was able to get the mental reps needed to be able to build up the momentum. And now he's just choosing the perfect hole. He's reacting the right time because he actually builds up that muscle memory. Because Criswell is no Drake May. I don't think anybody's going to say he is. And that allows Omari Hampton to be the reason why they're winning. And when you are kind of having to carry your team, you are most likely going to be a much more improved player, because you're having those experience. You're going to have that experience. And then also you're just going to be an absolute savage because, well, you're kind of being the reason why your team's winning the game. And he's just improved so much. Honestly, I love Omari Hampton. Again, I don't want to go too into depth about it because that's what the whole entire point of my probably it's not going to be 2 hours. It will be probably like hour 15, breaking down running backs in this coming up draft. So super excited for that coming up this week. Omari Hampton, though, fantastic job. I would not be surprised if he goes in the top 12. Then we got Drew Allar. I mean, this guy was QB 17 for me coming into the year. And all of a sudden, people are talking about him as a guaranteed first-round pick. I'm not there just yet. You guys know exactly, for those of you guys who do watch my show on regular, you guys know that I don't even have a quarterback in my top 32. That is adjusted for positional value and everything. I don't have a drop into an NFL roster and they start day one kind of guy in this class. Now, I think with certain systems that work with certain players and, good coaching, you can end up convincing me that these guys can end up starting. And I think that means there will be 3 of them that I think would be able to start. And Drew Allar is one of them. It is, Shadur, Cam, and Drew. So I do think that I agree with the consensus on the top 3 quarterbacks at the moment in the draft. But Drew Allar is no longer remotely close to QB 17. This guy couldn't hit a moving target to save his life. I remember saying this guy's accurate when the guy's not moving, and that's about it. And, I've seen videos of his progression and mechanics over the years, and it's continuing to get better and better. This is a guy, like, the Steelers are my team. So putting it as a dream fit is like a very ballsy thing for me to do, because obviously I don't think that he's a day one starter. But I do think in an offense that is very run heavy, maybe, theoretically speaking, I mean, the Steelers are probably going to be around 20. We can end up getting Omari Hampton. I never know. I mean, it is going to be he's going to be a first round running back at this point based on his play. Omari Hampton, and then maybe if we got ballsy, trade back into the first, get someone like Drew Allar with a 5th-year contract, or we could see the NFL treat Drew Allar the way they treated Will Levis and end up allowing him dropping a little bit into the 2nd round, where, maybe the Steelers can get Hampton as well as Allar there. But regardless, this guy's done such a phenomenal job. His composure is through the roof. He doesn't have a billion weapons there to be able to, pretty much crutch himself on. He has Tyler Warren, and that's about it. And, I mean, Tyler Warren's amazing. Like, God bless, a good tight end is a quarterback's best friend. But at the same time, he doesn't have elite offensive tackle play. Literally, his top 10 pick left tackle ended up leaving. Now, there is another tackle. I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head, but he was in a 2026 way too early mock draft that I did. Feel free to check that out. And, I was very excited to see, because his numbers are actually pretty damn solid. But I still think that, when you end up losing a true cornerstone left tackle that is a blue chip level college player, you expect a big drop off, and Drew Allar actually took a step up. So good job for him. He's done a really good job this year. People actually watch the coaching film. Like, he looks so crap on TV comparatively to what it is on coaching film, even though Drew has those good plays. But yeah, bottom line is, when you see a player have really good work ethic, and I already hear the dumbasses trying to say, oh, Alex is glazing a white quarterback, shut the fuck up. My top 2 quarterbacks are black. Just going to say, had a white dude, it's QB17. People like to drop the R card. If you guys are wondering if I'm reacting too much, I mean, people just love it, which, I mean, that is society today, but not the conversation for today. But, my thing that I want to take away from this is, if you end up seeing that these quarterbacks are putting a ton of work in the offseason, and I'm not just talking about, like Cam and Shedeur were part of this little QB school that was in the backyard of someone's house. Like, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about where you can see a legitimate year over year progression, where you're following their quarterback coach and watching how they've grown as a player. Not like, oh yeah, you're in season, you're like getting trained by people. Like, everybody's getting trained, bro. But watching these players actually make those improvements, that's something that I end up, it's something I love, but it's something that I should be doing a little bit more research on. And I think I would have loved Drew Allar a little bit more coming into it. But for the rest of these guys, a little bit less in depth. Tyler Warren, basically, he was too inconsistent. I mean, last year when he was behind Theo Johnson, never got the chance to truly shine out as a tight end 1. But I mean, there were those flashes where I was like, holy shit, this guy looks like a super stud. And then I believe he had issues with drops last year, but when it came to drops, when it came to like missed blocks as well, it was very surprising. And, Tyler Warren solidified himself as arguably tight end 1 in this class, undisputably tight end 2. So, good job for him, improving that consistency. Once again, building that bond with his quarterback. It's, you can't undermine that. Like, it's honestly such a great thing when you get to have that, like, that connection with your quarterback. Cam Ward, he also improved noticeably. I think he was my QB10 at the start of the year, obviously QB2 now. And that, to be fair, is not necessarily solely because Cam Ward has like ascended. It also is because certain quarterbacks took certain steps back. I also ended up implementing a ±7 for people's frames, like Dylan Gabriel, Noah Fafita. But Noah Fafita as well kind of shot himself in the foot. There's going to be a lot of guys I could have put on move down, and then fell down. Didn't end up necessarily talking about all of them, but regardless, continuing on, like Cam Ward has just improved noticeably, and he's done it a lot of the years that he's had, but he still has those key hiccups that I have issues with, which is, he's a very tenured starter that still makes boneheaded rookie mistakes. And it's like that, I don't know how it'll translate to the NFL, where the NFL DBs are way smarter. The NFL offenses are way more complex. If you're making boneheaded mistakes, will that follow you? And that's something that I'm very excited to watch with Cam Ward and see how that plays out in the NFL. Because genuinely speaking, I do have my my concerns as to whether I can really trust, like, if I could project that very well. And I do want to be able to see that. Emeka Egbuka, I mean, he's going to be rising up. You guys know I had him, I think, as like wide receiver 23 coming into the year. And that sounds insane, but when you look at like the groups of guys, they're just certain my guys, not necessarily that Emeka was ass. Emeka just wasn't healthy. And I like to grade players on the style of player that they are. So this is something I was praying to God was actually going to happen. And it did. So Emeka stayed healthy. He ended up having another year in that same role. It wasn't a new role for him. And he ended up showing out, and I'm super excited for that. He's done a great job there at Ohio State. Then Josh Simmons is next. He was somebody who I kept saying is like, hey, this guy shows everything that I'm looking for. And, he just hasn't pieced it together, and he ended up doing it. So honestly, something that I would end up taking from this is being able to, give a little bit more credit for guys who show proper mechanics, proper form, even if it doesn't end up going out in the play. Like, maybe I could drop the actual impact of the mechanics, but at least give them a little bit more credit in terms of that it factor, where it's like, hey, I can see it. And, I didn't really do a good enough job with that with Josh Simmons. Granted, you guys know where I think of him right now. That's why I like to grade players on what they are, but I think I could have mitigated my concerns with Josh Simmons with a little bit more optimism with that it factor. JT Tuimoloau. I mean, this dude is somebody who I've been notoriously hating against for like pretty much his entire time there at Ohio State. Like, I genuinely never got that first round hype from him. Like, people tried to glaze this guy, and I'm like, dude, this guy's cheeks. And I don't think that I was wrong in that situation. I just think this year, and it's so funny because people got prospect fatigue. They're like always talking about like glazing JT Tuimoloau. All of a sudden, he actually starts performing well, and it's like, well, we're kind of tired of standing up for the guy. Like, honestly, it sucks because I really do think that, like, I never had prospect fatigue. Maybe I have hate fatigue. Maybe there's that, but like, I ended up posting it on my X page. There's this clip like at the start of the Oregon game where he's on the opposite side of the field and they run an outside zone to the opposite side of him and he chases it down from behind. And it's just like, that's the type of athleticism, applied athleticism, and overall IQ that I did not see him have. And the wins that he was able to have versus Josh Connerly, who was a top-end tackle, was awesome to see. So JT Tuimoloau deserves a ton of respect. Again, like for me, I think that like something I could end up kind of learning is don't hold grudges. To be fair, I did have JT Tuimoloau higher than most people coming into the year, but it's just like, don't allow former frames of mind to be able to hold you back from being able to actually appreciate a talent for developing and growing. Because even if they weren't that good before, and you were right, which I do feel like I was with JT, it doesn't mean that they aren't actually finally clicking. Like, there are guys who take a hockey stick growth curve, and I think that's what JT Tuimoloau has finally done. He showed blips of it before, and now he's finally come to form. And it's kind of sad that people don't really give that to him. I think prospect fatigue has, really gotten the best of him. Ja'Cory Brooks is next. My hate for him is justified, or not hate. I had a lot of unwarranted optimism where I'm like, hey, I could see these flashes of this dude, right? Like, he runs these certain routes well, he's athletic, but there's a large resume that is complete crap, which is a massive fall off at Alabama. And then you transfer to Louisville, you have drop issues, and he still does have drop issues, but man, I think he's truly flourished there at Louisville. I don't know if he's necessarily going to come out. Again, this is not an all-inclusive list. This is just guys who I really want to give some shout outs to. But Ja'Cory Brooks, to me, is a top 64 player in this class. If he can end up getting on the jugs machine, which I know a lot of NFL wide receivers have drop issues, like, it's not going to be the deal breaker for me because it's at sub 11%. If you're in that like 12, 13, 14, I really start exponentially getting more worried about you. After 10, I start getting more and more worried. Like, 10's the big marker for me. And Ja'Cory, I think, might have had 16% coming into the year. That number might be pulled out of my ass, but it popped up in my head. But still, Ja'Cory had those issues, and he's finally putting it all together there at Louisville. It makes me so happy to see. I still think he's relatively one-dimensional as a deep threat, but I just think he's become so much more comfortable as a player. And, I'm not necessarily going to say this is a big, a big learning moment for me, because, again, I had those, like, hey, I feel like this guy could end up bouncing back because you saw it at Alabama, but at the same time, it's like when you see someone go to a new spot, don't necessarily imagine it as a potential drop-off. Even if it's from Alabama to Louisville, like, it looks like a top of the SEC to a competitor in the ACC. Like, it could appear like that, but, certain players just thrive in different offenses, and, I don't think necessarily Ja'Cory transferred because he sucked. There's like a new regime change. And so Ja'Cory Brooks, again, want to give him all the love in the world, give him his flowers. Next, I almost said it like number whatever in mock draft form. We got Riley Mills, man. Another guy that you just see this like relatively underweight, 295 white dude, playing next to someone who has statistically a better season in Howard Cross last year, and you're just like, okay, I'm gonna write this dude off. Howard Cross already is like a developmental guy for me because of his size and everything. You don't really think that, Riley Mills, when, you don't really see him doing anything, is going to be someone that you end up really loving. But then you start realizing, wow, Riley Mills is taking a lot of double teams. And then when he's not, he's making plays. So, for me, it was a big teaching moment because it was very recent. Like, I didn't like Riley Mills up until like a week or two ago. Like, straight up, like, I couldn't really understand it. And it wasn't based on like pure tape. It really was based on like my perception of Howard Cross versus what I saw as a worse player than Howard Cross. And when it came similar to what I was talking about with Skattebo, I'm like, well, I'm going to put actually studying this guy on a lower priority because I've seen him via osmosis of watching other players. And I know that there are certain content creators that I know personally that are willing to watch a game and scout multiple players at the same time. I personally will not do that. That's just a quality control thing for me because I like to lock the fuck in. Like, that's just me. I might end up seeing a player I like and then like writing him down for later. There's a Baylor linebacker. Actually, I think he just ended up, he ended up confirming he's going to be coming on the show. But he ended up, when I was watching, who the hell was I watching? I think it was Devin Neal. I ended up like really liking him. I'm like, okay, well, I like his tape. I saw him in person. I liked him there. So let's just table it for later. Give him a shout out, right? Like, I can't watch him and Devin Neal at the same time. I can't watch Jalen Daniels and Devin Neal at the same time, even though that would be a lot easier than just two running backs going back and forth or two defensive interiors, right? I prefer to have much higher quality control in terms of the scouting that I actually do, because I think you guys deserve that. I mean, honestly, I think I deserve to be able to like proudly say I watched a player rather than, watched a group and then I was like, okay, well, I think this guy's top 50. I think this guy's top 75. Like, that's just not the type of guy I am. I know some people are a lot better at that, and maybe they are much better at doing that than just watching one player. But for me, it was really comparative analysis of looking at Howard Cross, not really falling in love with him, seeing some potential there, but watching Riley Mills not nearly flash as much and saying, hey, I'm going to put that lower on the priority list. And, well, basically, like, shut the fuck up. Rather than watching an extra TV show, watch some guys you don't want to watch. That's kind of the pain in the ass part of the job. Now, do I wish I got paid more to do that? Yes, but I'm building a business here, and you guys are there building it with me, which I love you guys for. So Riley Mills, it really is just like very similar to Cam Skattebo. Don't take guys for granted, especially if they're white. like apparently, I just write off white dudes, just like Riley Mills, Cam Skattebo. I'm just like, nah. Like, no way. Obviously, that's a joke. I already hear the trolls getting pissy about it, but trolls aren't even listening at this point of the video. So at least there's that. But regardless, don't write off people. And no, I did not write them off because they're skin color. I wrote them off for several other reasons. Like ASU running back, and then also doesn't look as exciting as a player I'm not very excited about. But regardless, Riley Mills ended up being one of the bigger surprises for me and ended up being a really good player. Arianti Urzuri's next. I have not officially regraded him, but simply just looking at the progression, like watching other players against him, it's awesome because I had Arianti coming into the year as someone who I wouldn't even have as a fringe starter as a tackle. And I had him kind of more developmental as a guard. I said, hey, this guy should play guard in the short run, develop as a pass blocker, and I still think he's taking big steps. I think he's going to grade much lower than where I'm comfortable taking him because I see the development curve for him, and it's similar to what I'm talking about Drew Allar. Like, when you start seeing the steps year over year, especially when their steps are getting bigger and bigger, you got to give him credit for that, because most of the time, if you end up like, that's why I wish I was part of like an NFL team, you get to sit down and meet with them. You get to learn their personality, their work ethic. And that's why, like, I jumped the gun on Jordan Davis. I was really against Jordan Davis. And then I saw how well he did at the combine, how in shape he looked. I'm like, that takes dedication. Like, that's hard work ethic. And I'm not going to say that's not the case with JD, but like, I over-applied it there. With Arianti, I don't think I'm going to, because obviously I'm not saying, hey, I'm going to take this guy top 10. Like, I think he'll end up, like, projection-wise, again, I've watched other people, and I'm just being completely frank with you guys. I think he'll grade out like a 71, like a fringe starting tackle. But watching that big 5-point jump, like, fuck yeah. And then you imagine going to NFL coaches, because I don't think Minnesota's done a great job teaching their tackles. Like, Failele was extremely raw coming into the league. I haven't really seen any other Minnesota tackle legitimately have an NFL foundation the way Urzuri does. I hated Failele, so I'm just going to put that out there as well. But Urzuri, I think, will come in and have even more proper coaching, and then he could even get up to like a 75 and 80 at that point, where he really gets to thrive and to like actually be able to be himself. So I think the thing is with Urzuri, I honestly don't really, again, something where it's like, yeah, I honestly don't have a big learning lesson from it. So it's just somebody that, hey, they took a big step up. Like, I'm very happy for that. So it wasn't that I was wrong. It was just, well, Like maybe he didn't need to go to guard as like I thought he would. Like you should trust certain players to develop. And Ursary definitely is showing that he's growing similar to Micah Parsons. Not Mike. He kind of is low-key Micah Parsons, but Abdul Carter taking a little bit faster of a growth curve. Ashton Genty's next. This is solely because of fumbles, man. I mean, I think he only had 1 fumble on this year. So shout out to Ashton Genty, the true Heisman winner. But Ashton Genty, bottom line, there's nothing really like deep with this one. It really was. He was a really good running back that had I think it was 5 fumbles, and I think it was 6 fumbles with like 300 carries. For me, the threshold that I like is a fumble per 100 carries. That's where I start that's like my 7 or 6.5 out of 10 territory, right? And then, you obviously look at context, like why'd you fumble? Like that could shift some things too. Which Genty, I did have a little bit more optimism, which his fumbling grade should be, or ball security grade should be a lot lower. But I'm being very positive in the fact that A, most recent resume looks great. B, 2023, a lot of it was second effort, which, I mean, like, yeah, it happens in the NFL, but it's also seeing him grow from it. I'm perfectly fine leaving that in the past. Jahdae Barron is final, and the big reason for Jahdae is solely because I didn't know if he could transition to boundary cornerback full-time. This is more so to give Jahdae the love that he deserves. It really was like, hey, I don't know if this guy in college, I see Andrew Makuba go to Texas, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, you can't just bench Jahdae Barron. It's like, no, Jade's going to boundary. I'm like, isn't he like sub 6 foot with short arms? And, I mean, it's true. But Jade's made it work, and Texas has made it work as well. So I really got to show love to those guys. Again, there's so many other players that I really, really love that I want to give credit for, but that I didn't at the beginning. But that's also what the whole entire offseason's for. I really just wanted to take some time and be able to, just talk about something that not many people are very comfortable talking about, which is where we failed and why. But let's talk about the guys who I loved and ended up falling off. I didn't include Connor Wegman in this. I tried not to include too many guys who are going back to school, but I'll honestly talk about Wegman, Miller Moss, even to that degree when we talk about the last guy, which is Noah Thomas, which I had him as a top 20 receiver. But regardless, let's get into this. Emery Jones starting out the top. I could have put Tetro McMillan as well as like one of the guys who ended up doing well, but I never really thought he ended up improving a lot. To be fair, I should have definitely put him up there, but I digress. Emery Jones is first here. Emery Jones is someone who I had as like offensive lineman 1. Like Marcus Bowe might have been the only guy who graded above him, and Marcus Bowe technically he's come down to earth because now we think of him as a guard more than a pure tackle. But regardless, Emery Jones, Marcus Bowe, both in the same conversation, but Emery Jones to a much larger degree. Emery just showed that he slowed down for some reason this year. His feet were a lot heavier, and he just ended up really proving that he's built to be an interior. And I think he was an interior back in high school, and he was recruited, if I'm not mistaken, as an interior as well, and ended up transitioning to tackle. This guy's a stout U type of dude. You still could get a true, legit tackle out of Emery Jones. I mean, we looked at 2023 and was like, hey, I honestly think this guy could end up being a really solid tackle. So if Stout U can end up making that work, awesome. But regardless, I don't think he would end up declaring if he didn't have faith that he'd go in the top 150. So I have no idea where exactly he will go. Maybe he's a 7th round pick, but he decided to declare when, his quarterback ended up staying. A little bit questionable in my opinion, but it is what it is. Emery Jones, really was a kick in the balls. Like, yeah, just the foot speed I think really can kill you, especially when you don't have very long arms. Like, you need to be able to stay in front of a player if you cannot keep them at range. And if you're not able to dictate the angle you're at, and also not dictate the range you're at, most of the time you're going to lose. So I think that's one of the big reasons why. Denzel Burke's next. I just didn't. So actually, funnily enough, Denzel Burke is the exact reason I ended up developing a new measure for athleticism for corners. So shout out to Denzel. I mean, his failure is a reason why I feel like I have a lot more clarity on the corners that I end up scouting. But, Denzel just didn't have great acceleration. The Oregon game truly showed it. I'm going to be 100% honest here, though. I think the Ohio State defensive coordinator or defensive back coach, whoever is designing how these corners are supposed to play during the game, doesn't know what they're doing. He's putting Denzel Burke and Davison Igbinosun in off coverage, and that's where both of them struggle. They both cannot handle that. Now, Denzel Burke was better last year. I don't know if he tweaked up his ankle or anything. This dude's dealt with injuries quite a while. I mean, I think he had like a thumb injury. He had multiple injuries in his freshman, sophomore campaigns. And so, like, it certainly is possible that that's the case. But yeah, Denzel Burke versus Oregon just really showed that lack of explosiveness and athleticism that, was kind of mitigated with the way that the defense was run the year before. And I'm very surprised that that the defense really is kind of crumbled in terms of using their players correctly. I think it is like a mark of bad coaching rather than bad talent. So that's why I still think it goes in the top 150. I think a team like the Ravens, you could also point out the Rams as well, that you don't necessarily need to have a 4.2 speed, which technically I guess the Ravens just drafted Nate Wiggins, who did. But regardless of that, I just trust the Ravens with defensive backs. The Rams are a great example of this, a team that can just really like scheme their players into the best position possible, especially for defenders. So I really love Denzel Burke still. It's just, there's much more limited possibilities for his success. Like the number of, you think about, was Avengers Endgame, like the amount of futures that end up yielding a winning result. It is much more limited now than if you looked at it at the start of the year. So again, not all is written off with Denzel Burke, but he wasn't even in my top 20 corners. But let's get into the rest of these guys. You got Ephesians Prysock here. The bottom line with Ephesians is, first off, he stayed with his coach, which is cool, right? He went to Washington, but at the same time, he just was a bit less athletic. I mean, I still have Ephesians Prysock very, very high, especially respective to the rest of the world. But I had Ephesians as like a top 10 type of dude. Like, I really liked him. And to be fair, he was corner number 2 when he had Tack Davis as number 1. So I will say that, like, he had to take a much larger plate, and then he ended up struggling a bit. Now, I also think that he's done actually a pretty good job at that. So learning lesson there, the play of a cornerback 2 does not necessarily mean they're going to perform the same when they're facing the number 1 receiver. So something to note there. Obviously, you can have a little bit of a range of skepticism when you end up evaluating players who are not the primary focus on defense or offense. Bo Collins is next. He's someone who I've been like waiting to drop just because I only grade in all 22. Doesn't mean that my board is complete hack. Like, there's a lot of it that's completely updated, but when it comes to certain players like Notre Dame offense, that's why you will see 3 of the Notre Dame offensive players on here. There's a little bit of a lag because, well, I wish I had PFF Ultimate, but I make the most out of what I have. And I want to be able to at least get to other guys like Cam Skattebo and, Riley Mills, like, speaking of Notre Dame, that I don't really, like, I should have been able to get to. I'm just human after all. So sometimes, hanging out with the girlfriend, grabbing dinner, being able to watch a show, I should have probably prioritized that. But for this, at least, it freed up that possibility. So still waiting on some Notre Dame offensive tape to be able to grade all these guys. Mitchell Evans, and Bo Collins both, I ended up regrading them based on their first game. Same thing with Riley Leonard. So I guess I'll like loop him in while we're talking about this, because Texas A&M defense is one of the like pieces, air quotes, one of the positional groups that gets tape every single week. So, week 1, obviously they played Texas A&M. So I got to regrade Collins, regrade Riley Leonard. Mitchell Evans wasn't featured very heavily in that game, which was very disappointing. But bottom line, Bo Collins has had a drop issue. I still really liked his play, so don't get me wrong there. I think he's a very underrated talent, but I also don't think he comes out to school if he has eligibility left. Which that's something, again, I'm going to be for real right now. Eligibility is still something that is kind of a little bit of an enigma to a lot of people. Like, guys can just randomly pull red shirts out of their ass. I mean, like, that's apparently a thing. But, I do believe he has extra eligibility left. He's not a redshirt senior off the top of my head. So I think he ends up returning to school to be able to show his talent, but it really was a little bit of an indictment on his ability, because at Clemson, he was able to dominate guys like Ben Morrison, which was really crazy. And Mitchell Evans, it was just a heavy drop in usage this year. I don't really think that he necessarily is an issue, but, coming off a season-ending injury, I think it was in the last game too that he played. He ended up, well, no shit, Sherlock, yeah, of course, but I think it was the last game of the season. He ended up with an ACL injury or maybe an Achilles. I'm forgetting what it was, but it was a legitimate big injury, and he ended up coming back and like just not being used the same, or just not being able to be used the same until he's fully healthy. So I'm praying that he ends up being able to get back to health and, being able to dominate, because I really think he was very, very underrated as a prospect. Like, I liked him as the top 32. I really like Mitchell Evans. And so hoping that he bounces back. But bottom line, I have the skepticism of a lot of players. There's a reason I didn't like Jonathan Brooks. I mean, sucks where he's at right now, and I'm not going to try to dance and like celebrate in terms of his misery, because it sucks. I really wish I were wrong, but I don't like trusting my evaluations of players pre-injury, like, especially when there's like a major injury, which is why I have issues with Ben Morrison coming out. With Josh Simmons, I feel like that leg injury, like, it wasn't necessarily mobility that was Josh Simmons' like big claim to fame. It really was just technique. And I don't think that necessarily goes with injury versus with a running back. I mean, like, yeah, with a corner hip injury, yeah, like I could see that being a massive shift in terms of what their play style could be like. So, but for Mitchell Evans, a tight end, like a major leg injury, yeah, that does affect him. So it's worth at least noting. Carson Beck, I mean, I didn't really love him coming to the season. Everyone was like, oh, this guy's worth the number 1 pick. I was very skeptical on that. So I guess this is like, I was right. But at the same time, I didn't think Carson Beck would take a regression step like this. And I don't really know why. I mean, to be fair, you lose Lad McConkey and Brock Bowers, a lot more of the spotlight is going to be on you. But I don't think Oscar Delp easily could have been on this too. I mean, like, we could toss him into this while we're talking about it. Oscar Delp was supposed to take a big step up, didn't do it. He had, a come out game, awesome, but I mean, that's supposed to be you the entire season, bro. Like, where the fuck have you been? And so Carson Beck hasn't had necessarily the running back play that's been super consistent. There's a lot of excuses you can make for Beck, but some of the boneheaded decisions as well weren't necessarily there before. The inconsistency with ball placement has been there before, and so it continued. You kind of hope that he would develop as a passer, and he did not. But, some guys just don't develop. Some guys just don't. And I didn't see that development step from Carson Beck. Regardless of the weapons around him, you could still see, I think that Einstein ended up talking about this quote, but basically when you look long enough at like the night sky, you get like a glimpse of something. It's like something deep, like deeply truthful or something like that, like deeply beautiful. Regardless, like when you get to watch a player, even if they're sucking, which is why I love to watch players' worst games, you can see like something beyond their poor performance as to like, actually, I really like this performance, even if it didn't end up working out. And I haven't really, like, I've gotten a couple of glimpses of that with Beck. Like, some of those high-level throws, I'm like, oh, very nice. But it was a lot less consistent than I was hoping for a player that I still had him probably in my top 50 range. Not there anymore. Then we got Damani Jackson. Damani came from USC to Alabama. I was really hoping for him to take a massive step up, and he still is a very, very good corner. I think he's just, going from Pac-12 to SEC, and I think that he should stay. I think he will stay, and I also think that he will get better. I think this is going to be someone that you have to go TBD on, and learning from my mistake, it's not necessarily you're just grabbing a player and then putting him on a team that is going to probably use him better. Like, it's not just that. You have to focus on the competition that he's facing, and be able to understand that maybe a 16 out of 20 for man coverage in the Pac-12 when you're not facing necessarily great receivers is going to be like a 14 out of 20 or maybe a 13 out of 20 when you go to the SEC. So I think that a lesson to be learned from that is like you can't just imagine players going to be dropped in and be the exact same dude they were for the team before if they're taking a big jump in terms of talent level that they are facing. Riley Leonard already talked about it. He's somebody who I thought was super consistent, even though he didn't do too well at Duke. It's just, he's not bad. It's just kind of boring. And when you put him above players who are better playmakers, I think that that's where I started, pretty much just valuing consistency over potential, which for the most part, that's why Shedeur Sanders is where he's at, right? It's not necessarily the potential of him being like the biggest arm guy or the biggest playmaker. Like, no, it really is because like this guy just knows where to throw the ball, can put it there, like, just do your job. And Riley Leonard is just like a microcosm of that, but there's like a certain threshold that you have to beat, right? To be able to be competitive as that style of quarterback. Otherwise, you're just not good enough in any category. So I think that's where I might have gone wrong there. Kobe Bryant's next. I mean, something about Kansas, man. Got to see him live, which is super fun, by the way. I mean, I don't know why I become like pretty much a Baylor fan. Just, hey, my girlfriend's a Baylor student, or Baylor nursing student, so she's a nurse. But she brought me to a Baylor game, and just being able to see these guys live in Baylor's environment is awesome. So if you guys live in Texas and can go to a Baylor game, and especially a good one like that, highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. It's a really fun event to go to. But that aside, Kobe's just gotten. My issue with Kobe is that he's so physical that he's not big enough to actually like. There's like a chihuahua that barks at you and you're like, dude, that's like a lot of barking. And it's like, but you can't do shit except like if you really want to go for me, you're going to be just a nuisance that you're going to be like squish and no more chihuahua, right? That kind of was what Kobe Bryant was doing. He had that beautiful hit stick last year. And this year when he fails, like the dude, rather than just adjusting his form, is like that little chihuahua just like barking, trying to nip at your ankles. And I'm like, dude, like, rather than just holding on to somebody and, like, absolutely getting fleeced by these receivers, adjust your form. And I didn't see that reactive capability that I was hoping to see from Kobe Bryant. And then we got Dillon Gabriel. The only reason Dillon's fallen is because he was my QB1. So let's put that out there. I really like him still. Like, don't get me wrong, but I was having him, like, noticeably high. And, I mean, again, I feel really happy that I love Dillon Gabriel coming into the year. Did not get enough love from anybody, so maybe like my disproportionate love ended up affecting it. But I just didn't value the size of a quarterback enough, and that's why he and Noah Fafita are the main reasons why I expanded my plus or minus it factor, not from 3 to 3, but 7 to 7, like -7 to 7. And, being under 200 pounds, being under 6 foot, like those are issues. And, that is something that you do need to address. But as a passer, I thought he's done a great job. There's a reason why Oregon's so successful. So, I learned my lesson as to understanding how to weight frame properly. And so, I'm glad that it was a big learning lesson, because it's one of 2 videos I've done for quarterbacks for this year's draft. Is the first one and then the one I just did recently. And the first one had Dillon Gabriel as quarterback 1. So until very recently, if anybody wanted to legitimately look up a video for Hail Mary Sports, my dumb ass is having Dillon Gabriel as my QB1. So I'm not saying that's impossible, but I'm saying that I did not represent what the talent as well as the measurables properly. I kind of disproportionately measured the talent. Kaytron Allen's next. I overrated his athleticism. That's just the bottom line. The dude just is not a good athlete. And again, I don't want to talk too much about it because, well, I'm going to be doing it for a much longer period of time in my running back video coming up. But yeah, Kaytron Allen, I do think that he has great vision, but I honestly, I should have known the moment that Kenneth Grant's fat ass, I mean, to be fair, that dude is very athletic, but I mean, 340 pounds of meat is tackling you from behind. Like, brother, you got to be faster than that. I mean, like, you're a running back. Running, and you're not able to outrun a 350-pound defensive interior. That's what I should have picked up on that key last year. I didn't, and I overrated it because I like to be nice to running backs on athleticism, because I don't like to say running backs are slow because they're always running. But that aside, I had a big love for Kaytron Allen, and he's still not a bad back. It's just like this dude is genuinely a borderline committee back where you're kind of using him as a pure goal line guy, probably going to be a backup or a practice squad guy. So it's unfortunate, but Kaytron Allen, someone who I really was hoping to take a big step up this year, just really started showing the legitimate issues in his game. And then I have Noah Thomas here, which, I mean, to be fair, I don't even know why the hell I put Noah Thomas. The easy answer could have been Connor Wegman. And you know what? Like, we'll toss Noah Thomas in here. Noah Thomas was part of an offense that wasn't necessarily built to produce a top 20 NFL receiver. Simply put, he's just not allowed to be utilized properly. So maybe in the NFL, he still will be as good as what I think he could be. But outside of that, we'll just actually talk primarily about Connor Wegman. It's another guy where it's like, hey, Connor Wegman showed unbelievable potential, right? Like, it was Trevor Sikkema's QB1 coming into the year. So I guess, at least I wasn't like, I can understand that type of love. I ended up saying, hey, Connor Wegman's going to be the first quarterback potentially taken off the board if he really bounces back. But I should have known when I see a quarterback have issues processing in the red zone, which that was Connor Wegman's biggest problem for me. Like, every time he's in the red zone, the dude flustered up and made horrible decisions. And when you have that, it shows that you're premature and very immature as a processor. And then when you get hurt only a couple of games in, you don't have those mental reps. Remember what I was talking about with, Emery and Hampton having all those reps of being like the main guy? Like, you need to be able to have those to be able to go and be able to be an efficient quarterback. That's why I think Anthony Richardson's still having some issues in the NFL. I mean, the poor guy already was kind of progressing, got hurt, and then he came back, and it's like, well, you kind of expect him to be at year 2 when they're kind of having to revert back to year 1, and then you add on like 13 games of experience before, like from high school to college, and it's like, I mean, I understand why they struggle, and I'm seeing Connor Wegman go to Houston, and I think he's going to do a great job there. So keep that in mind. I mean, it's not that just because I said these guys fell down or fell off, it's like, it doesn't mean that their career's over, but it just means that I might have jumped the gun, especially in terms of analyzing who they are as a prospect. And, mitigating excitement is very tough to do. And honestly, it's one of the things that is shitty to do because, we watch a lot of players that we don't get excited about. And, when we get excited, sometimes it's a little disproportionate. So, with Wegman, it was those big plays. And it's like, I should have weighed both the inexperience as well as the lack of processing in a key area a little bit more. But that's going to be the video. This was a longer one than expected. I honestly thought it was going to be like a 15-minute, but I actually kind of just like being able to break down why I didn't do something right. Like, I mean, I guess like biggest one, honestly, the biggest takeaway for me, and it's something that I'm very grateful I ended up doing for both cornerbacks and receivers, is kind of being a little bit more specific with my terminology or by developing different roles. And for receivers, like I should have mentioned this for Tetero McMillan. I should have included him in this. I don't know why the fuck I didn't. But I had him as a top 10 receiver as a red zone X build receiver and as a deep threat, which has its own respective value. And he's done a lot better this year than last year. I'm not taking my grade back, but it was, trying to at least understand where he could have been. And, I should have seen a little bit more of the potential, but regardless, it ended up making me start to think, well, maybe overall grades aren't really that important. Maybe it really is solely role specific because guys get drafted to play a role. But I also am making content talking about all 32 teams and what they should value. So because of these guys, I mean, the biggest takeaway is be more specific. For corners, there's a difference between acceleration and speed when it comes to athleticism. Which one do you value more? That's going to be very up to you and up to the system specifically. But it's very key, rather than saying how they are as an athlete, understanding what they are in terms of explosiveness as well as their top speed. And if their top speed is low, but they're explosive, put them in a system that has good safeties. You guys get the deal. But bottom line is, continue, especially for the people who are trying to start out and do their own stuff, because I've gotten a couple messages about this. Obviously, I started this 4.5 years ago. And I didn't scout before that. Like, I didn't. I just watched a couple of guys while I was like, just getting into college football. Like, I got into college football, what was that, 2018? Like, it was 2 years before I ended up getting into this, which is insane. But, the truth is, I just ended up liking this Kadarius Toney punt return, and I just wrote his name down, and I just wanted to see. And from then on, all I did before that, like since 2015 was, I think, the first draft I actually ended up like watching like live. And, I didn't really understand much except like, oh, cool. I just listened to Daniel Jeremiah and Mel Kiper talk about guys, which it gets you somewhere. But, obviously those guys make mistakes as well. I wish that more people made content like this. But the bottom line is that I'm still so new to this. And I know that a lot of you guys are as well. The biggest thing that you can do, the best thing you can do, and again, I don't think people do it very often because no one likes to feel like they're illegitimizing themselves, which I kind of guess I am. But, just continue telling yourself, like, understanding why you did something wrong. I'm like, understand why you did something right. It helps. But understanding how to avoid being wrong usually tends to give you right results. And so just understand your failures. Again, obviously, if you can, understand your successes too. But really being able to watch more and more film, make sure you have a high quality control, which, again, I know not many people do, unfortunately, in this industry. But I at least want to put that on myself because, it makes me understand that when I'm or it makes me feel confident when I talk to you guys that when I do have an opinion, it's actually informed. And it's not based off of, whether a camera angle from a cameraman on TV did it well. So just keep the quality control high. Make sure that you always continue shaving down, like iron sharpens iron. Ask people how to improve and you'll get there. I mean, I'm still on my path. I mean, I know a lot of you guys are just starting your path too, but just start. Don't try to, get scared and kind of put yourself in a corner being like, well, I don't know what to do for my first video. I don't know what to do after my first couple of videos. Just do something. I mean, the easiest thing to do is do a video on each of the teams. That'll give you a month of content before you have to do something new. Just saying. That's kind of what I do during summer. So I'm gonna stop ratting on myself there. But I love you guys. I really do hope that you enjoyed the video. I'm going to be doing something like this where I'm going to end up explaining why I got certain players that I loved right. But this is going to be a video that I actually value a lot more than that one. But that one's still going to be super key for hey, people value my cornerback eyes. Like, I'm a good corner scout. Like, being able to understand and teach people why, probably a good reason. Probably a good reason to watch. Like, something that I should be telling you guys about. So, technically, should I put this behind a Patreon wall? Maybe. But who gives a shit? I mean, you guys are literally, look at this. Yeah, this is definitely not YouTube quality right here. But yeah, I mean, bottom line, I want you guys to be able to understand this. I'm not in this just for the money. Otherwise, I would not be putting in the time that I do. Like, YouTube doesn't pay like that. But, it's still very rewarding because I'd be doing at least 50% of this regardless. So I'm glad that we've been able to make this journey together, and we're going to continue to do that. And we're going to continue doing this every year because I set the standard for myself. And the standard is we always continue to reevaluate ourselves, the players we watch, and the work we do. So I love you. See you on the far side.